The layer one is the property settlement layer, and we're going to do 350,000 transactions or less a day. 100 million transactions a year is the bandwidth on the layer one, and it would be an ideal layer one to move $1 billion from point A to point B with the massive security. The role of the layer one is two things. One thing is I want to move a large sum of money through space with security. I can move any amount of Bitcoin in a matter of minutes for dollars on layer one. The second important feature of the layer one is I need the money to last forever, right? I need the money indestructible, immortal. So the bigger trick is not to move $1 billion from here to Tokyo. The big trick is to move $1 billion from here to the year 2140. And that's what we want to solve with layer one. And the best real metaphor in New York City would be the granite or the schist. What you want is a city block of bedrock. And how long has it been there? Like millions of years it's been there. And how fast do you want it to move? You don't. In fact, the single thing that's most important is that it not deflect. If it deflects a foot in 100 years, it's too much. If it deflects an inch in 100 years, you might not want that. So the layer one of Bitcoin is a foundation upon which you put weight. How much weight can you put on it? You put 1 trillion, 10 trillion, 100 trillion, a quadrillion. How much weight's on the bedrock in Manhattan, right? Think about 100-story buildings. So the real key there is the foundational asset needs to be there at all. So the fact that you can create $100 trillion layer one that would stand for 100 years, that is the revolutionary breakthrough first time. And the fact that it's ethical, right? It's ethical and it's common property, global, permissionless. Extremely unlikely that would happen. People tried 50 times before and they all failed. They tried 15,000 times after, and they've all generally failed. 98% have failed, and a couple have been less successful. But for the most part, that's an extraordinary thing. Now,
just really quickly pause just to define some terms. For people don't know, layer one is that Michael's referring to is in general what people know of as the Bitcoin technology originally defined, which is the blockchain. There's a consensus mechanism of proof of work, low number of transactions, but you can move a very large amount of money. The reason he's using the term layer one is now that there's a lot of ideas of layer two technologies that built on top of this bedrock that allow you to move a much larger number of transactions, higher frequency. I don't know what terminology you want to use, but basically be able to use now something that is based on Bitcoin to then buy stuff, be a consumer, to transfer money, to use it as currency. Just to define some terms.
Yeah. So the layer one is the foundation for the entire cyber economy. And we don't want it to move fast. What we want is immortality, immortal, incorruptible, indestructible, right? That's what you want, integrity from the layer one. Now there's layer two and layer three, and layer two I would define as an open, permissionless, non-custodial protocol that uses the underlying layer one token as its gas fee.
So what's custodial mean, and how does the different markets, is Lightning Network?
So Lightning Network would be an example of a layer two, non-custodial. So the Lightning Network will sit on top of layer one. It'll sit on top of Bitcoin, and it solves what you want to do is solve the problem of, it's well and fine. I don't want to move $1 billion every day. What I want to move is $5 a billion times a day. So if I want to move $5 a billion times a day, I don't really need to put the entire $1 trillion of assets at risk every time I move $5. All I really need to do is put $100,000 in a channel or $1 million in a channel. And then I do 10 million transactions where I have $1 million at risk. And of course, it's kind of simple. If I lower my security requirement by a factor of 1 million, I can probably move the stuff 1 million times faster, right? And that's how Lightning works. It's non-custodial because there's no corporation or custodian or counterparty you're trusting, right? There's the risk of moving through the channel, but Lightning is an example of how I go from 350,000 transactions a day to 350 million transactions a day. So on that layer 2, you could move the Bitcoin in seconds for fractions of pennies. Now, that's not the end all be all, because the truth is there are a lot of open protocols. Lightning probably won't be the only one. There's an open market competition of other permissionless open source protocols to do this work. And in theory, any other crypto network that was deemed to be property, deemed to be non-security, you could also think of as potentially a layer 2 to Bitcoin, right? There's a debate about, are there any and what are they? And we could leave that for a later time.
But why do you think of them as layer 2 as opposed to contending for layer 1?
Yeah, actually, if they're using their own token, then they are a layer 1. If you create an open protocol that uses the Bitcoin token as the fee, then it becomes a layer 2.
Okay.
Right? Bitcoin itself, right, incentivizes its own transactions with its own token, and that's what makes it layer 1.
Okay, what's layer 3 then?
Layer 3 is a custodial layer. So if you want to move Bitcoin in milliseconds for free, you move it through Binance or Coinbase or Cash App. So this is a very straightforward thing. I mean, it seems pretty obvious when you think about it that there are going to be hundreds of thousands of layer 3s. There may be dozens of layer 2s. Lightning is A1, but it's not the only one. Anybody can invent something, right? And we can have this debate about custodial, non-custodial.
Don't you think there's a monopolization possibilities at layer 3? So, you mentioned Binance, Coinbase. What if they start to dominate and basically everybody's using them, practically speaking, and then it becomes too costly to memorize the private key in your brain? I mean, or like cold storage of layer 1 technology.
The idealists fear the layer 3s because they think, and especially they would detest a bit. There's almost like a layer 4, by the way, if you want to. A layer 4 would be, I've got Bitcoin on an application, but I can't withdraw it. So I've got an application that's backed by Bitcoin, but the Bitcoin is sealed. It's a proprietary example. And I'll give you an example of that. That would be like Grayscale. If I own a share of GBTC, and so I own a security, actually, you could own MSTR. If you own a security or you own a product that has Bitcoin embedded in it, you get the benefits of Bitcoin, but you don't have the ability to withdraw the asset.
So you can have a security market at layer 4. Am I understanding this correctly?
I don't know if I would say, not all securities are layer 4, but anything that's a proprietary product based upon with Bitcoin embedded in it, where you can't withdraw the Bitcoin, is another application of Bitcoin. So if you think about different ways you can use this, you can either stay completely on the layer 1 and use the base chain for your transactions, or you can limit yourself to layer 1 and layer 2 Lightning. And the purist would say we stay there, get your Bitcoin off the exchange. But you could also go to the layer 3. When Cash App supported Bitcoin, they made it very easy to buy it, and then they gave you the ability to withdraw. When PayPal, or I think Robinhood, let you buy it, they wouldn't let you withdraw it, and there was a big community uproar, and people want these layer 3s to make it possible to withdraw the Bitcoin so you can take it to your own private wallet and get it off the exchange. I think the answer to the question of, well, is corruption possible, is corruption is possible in all human institutions and all governments everywhere. The difference between digital property and physical property is when you own a building in Los Angeles and the city politics turn against you, you can't move the building.
Yeah.
And when you own a share of a security that's like a US traded security and you wish to move to some other country, you can't take the security with you either. And when you own a bunch of gold and you try to get through the airport, they might not let you take it. So Bitcoin is advantageous versus all those because you actually do have the option to withdraw your asset from the exchange. And if you had Bitcoin with Fidelity and you had shares of stock with Fidelity, and if you had bonds and sovereign debt with Fidelity, and if you own some mutual funds and some other random limited partnerships with Fidelity, none of those things can be removed from the custodian. But the Bitcoin you can take off the exchange, you can remove from the custodian. So.
It's still possible.
There's
though.
a deterrent. There's a deterrent that's an anti-corrupting element. And the phrase is an armed society is a polite society, right? Because you have the optionality to withdraw all your assets from the crypto exchange, you can enforce fairness. And at the point where you disagree with their policies, you can, within an hour, move your assets to another counterparty or take personal custody of those assets. And you don't have that option with most other forms of property. Maybe you don't have as much optionality with any other form of property on Earth. And so what makes digital property distinct is the fact that it has the most optionality for custody. Now, coming back to this digital energy issue, the real key point is the energy moves in milliseconds for free on layer 3s. It moves in seconds or less than seconds on layer 2s. It moves in minutes on the layer 1. And I don't think it makes any sense to even think about trying to solve all three problems on the layer 1 because it's impossible to achieve the security and the incorruptibility and the immortality if you try to build that much speed and that functionality and performance. In fact, if you come back to the New York model, you really wanted a block of granite, a building, and a company. That's what makes the economy, right? If I said to you, you're going to build a building, but you can only have one company in it for the life of the building, it would be very fragile, like very brittle. What company 100 years ago is still relevant today? You want all three layers because they all oscillate at different frequencies. And there's a tendency to think, well, it's got to be this L1 or that L1. Not really. And sometimes people think, well, I don't really want any L3. But companies, it's not an either or. Companies are better than crypto asset networks at certain things. If you want complexity, you want to implement complexity, or you want to implement compliance or customer service, right? Companies do these things well, right? We know you couldn't decentralize Apple or Netflix or even YouTube. The performance wouldn't be there and the subtlety wouldn't be there. And you can't really legally decentralize certain forms of banking and insurance because they would become illegal in the political jurisdiction they're in. So unless you're a crypto anarchist and you believe in no companies and no nation states, right? Which is just not very practical, not anytime soon. Once you allow that nation states will continue and companies have a role, then the layered architecture follows and the free market determines who wins. For example, there are layer 3s that let you acquire Bitcoin and withdraw Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. There are other applications that let you acquire it but not withdraw it, and they don't get the same market share, but they might give you some other advantage. There are certain layer 3s like Jack Dorsey's Cash App where they just incorporated Lightning, an implementation of it. So
Into Cash App.
So that makes it advantageous versus an application that doesn't incorporate Lightning. If you think about the big picture is 8 billion people with mobile phones served by 100 million companies doing billions of transactions an hour. And the companies are settling with each other on the base layer in blocks of 80 million at a time. And then the companies are trading with the consumers, right, in proprietary layers like layer 3. And then on occasion, people are shuffling assets across custodians with Lightning layer 2 because you don't want to pay $5 to move $50. You want to pay a 20th of a penny to move $50. And so all of these things create efficiency in the economy. And Lex, if you want to consider how much efficiency, if you gave me $1 billion in 20 years, I couldn't find a way to trade with another company or a counterparty in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
Like no amount of money. You give me $10 billion. I couldn't do it because you get shut down at the banking level. You can't link up a bank in Nigeria with a bank in the US. You get shut down at this credit card level because they don't have the credit card, so they won't clear. You get shut down at the compliance FCPA level because you wouldn't be able to implement a system that interfaced with somebody else's system if it's not in the right political jurisdiction. On the other hand, 3 entrepreneurs in Nigeria on the weekend could create a website that would trade in this Lightning economy using open protocols without asking anybody's permission. So you're talking about something that's like 1 million times cheaper, less friction, and faster to do it if you want to get money to move.